the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge, the safest, easiest, coolest way to place a bet on the internet. It's not like the big guys. There's no VIGs. You handle the bets. You handle everything. Visit bettoredge.com and learn more today. Use code SPOTTRACK for $20 when you sign up. And if and when you do sign up, plenty of contests running, including a weekly contest being scheduled by Spot Track coming soon. We're going to have some insight odds and things like that, contests running through spottrack.com. We're going to be connecting more and more with Bettor Edge, and you should too. Visit bettoredge.com for more. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, April 21st. Back after a good Easter break. Plenty of sports to get to. Let's start right out of the gate with the NFL. Cam Jurgens becomes the highest average paid center in the history of football. What else is new from the Philadelphia Eagles, who they're not toying with us, but they are running business status quo, which is early extensions. You add a little fluff to make sure the AAV sounds good to the talking heads. Make sure the guarantees are within reason of top of the market. And, it sounds like about $32 million, $39 million full on this Jurgens contract, which is a 4-year, $68 million extension through the 2029 season. It's just the latest, right? I think we've had one every couple of weeks in Philadelphia. Obviously, they like who they are because they've drafted phenomenally, mix in a couple of slam dunk free agency acquisitions, such as Saquon Barkley. And of course, you have the world at your fingertips, which is where Howie Roseman appears to be. All right. These are all clear-cut candidates for extensions. Saquon excluded because that was a bit of a pot sweetener that we didn't see coming. But this one was on the books, and it's going to reset the center market for other teams, which is the other reason you do this if you're Philadelphia, and you don't just rest on your laurels and sit on your hands. You want to put pressure on the rest of the league, who doesn't have as good and as deep as a roster as you do, to have to overpay. That's why you're doing this. That's why Saquon Barkley got his money. That's why these last contracts, I think there's 5 now, significant contracts in Philadelphia, look like they do. I'm not, if you could put them in comparison to a Buffalo, where every single contract extension, and I believe there's 5 notable ones there as well, comes with a little bit of value, right? It sounds great out of the gate, and it actually comes down to a very, very team-friendly number when it's all said and done and the structure is built out. Well, Philadelphia it looks like that's what's happening because of the way that they structure their contracts with their triple and quadruple option bonuses. But they are paying, all right? They are paying cash in hand year over year with sizable bonuses. And as we've mentioned before, and as the world, I think, is maybe waiting for, it's going to come to get them. But how much winning will get done before it does come to get them, and they look and feel and smell like the Saints do right now, which is a bit of a defunct roster and a financial struggle to actually maneuver out of it in any regard, quarterback included. They'll get there eventually, and they'll try to avoid it for as long as possible. And, Jalen Hurts being competent and team friendly for the next 3, 4, maybe 2, 3 years before they talk about a re-extension certainly helps that cause. But this Cam Jurgens extension is on track, on point, on time, and we'll certainly have the full breakdown when that becomes available in the coming days. We have detailed to about 99% degree the recent extensions for Jalen Petre in Houston, 3 for $39 and change, and Kyler Gordon in Chicago. Those are now live on SpotTrack.com. We're just a couple of contracts away from being 100% flush with the free agency buzz, the extension buzz. But, everything's going to ramp up here. There'll be some last minute moves and maneuvering as teams prepare for this Thursday draft. And then we'll get into the undrafted world, which is always fun. And a growing use case for a lot of teams. We're going to see a lot more guarantees than we've seen in the past. Base salaries that look like minimum salaries to some degrees for some of these guys, just to pull them into systems, because we're seeing more and more of these guys not only stick, but play. So it's a big week for wrap up extensions, maybe a trade or two, leading up to the draft. I don't believe we have a first round pick traded in 2025, which is kind of historic. Then all weekend long, we'll have the draft. And then starting Sunday, of course, the UDFA buzz that'll take us really throughout the full week before we have all 32 teams locked down and properly, officially announced with those lineups. So draft pools, we do have these available as placeholders on every team's page right now. So you can go to your favorite team, go to a cap view, and you'll be able to see, if you scroll down quite a bit, the actual pick by pick placement for Thursday through Sunday. And you will see then the total estimated cost from a cap perspective, and then how much of that cost will be allocated to the top 51, because that's really what matters right now for the next, obviously, 3-4 months. So the top 51 draft pool is the number you should be looking at kind of closely for your team. And by the way, subject to change as trades happen, as teams trade up, trade down, get out, get in. We'll have that updated as quickly as possible as those trades happen, so that you can sort of understand what your team's going to need. The reason I don't push this too much, and certainly why we don't even include it right now as an actual cap cost, is many of these teams will wait till the middle of June, sometimes even early July, to sign these players. And a lot of the top picks, because of the offset negotiations that happen, will take time to get done. So we're not going to bake it into the cake until it's officially signed. And that's what's going to happen for all 200 plus of these draft picks. When they're officially signed, they will officially hit the books. We have placeholder contracts, and that's our next topic to get to here on the Spot Track Draft Tracker. So if you're looking at the 2025 tracker for this week specifically, you'll see pick by pick, the full breakdown, and you'll also see projected 4-year contracts, signing bonuses for every single pick from 1 to 2 and change. That can be filtered by team, so you can see exactly how that's going to work for your team as things currently stand. And obviously, as these drafts happen, this will be filled in with the actual players that are drafted, and you'll be able to see immediately what the number 1 pick costs, projected right now at a 4-year, $43 million contract with a signing bonus just under $28 million. That might flex a little bit based on some of the math that comes into play with especially with the largely increased salary cap this year, as you know. But our projections are usually within digits, all right, in terms of these rookie contracts. So visit the draft tracker leading up to this week to kind of see where things stand. And then, like I said, we'll be going pick by pick, 1 through 257 this year, with every single name, every single projected contract, and the placeholder draft pools for each team leading up to actual draft signings in the coming weeks and months. 5th-year options. We've got a couple of those already reportedly on the books. The Jets locked in 3 of their first-round picks from 4 years ago, and they have exercised Jermaine Johnson, Garrett Wilson, and Sauce Gardner's 5th-year options. Just a couple things of this. I think I made note of this a few weeks back, but I do have a piece on spottrack.com that projects every single 5th-year option for this upcoming class in terms of the number of it, not necessarily what I think is going to happen. I think we can all sort of read some tea leaves with most of these players, and a few have been extended already. But the second that we get a yes or a no, okay, if it's a yes, if it's an exercise, that number becomes fully guaranteed for 2026. So you're going to see 2 things happen. You're going to see the salary hit the books in 2026, and you're going to see the dead cap for this and next year update for that player specifically, because it's an automatic guarantee on exercise. That's new with this latest CBA. And the other thing to get to, and I make mention of it in the article, if you're looking for actual deep down details, if you aren't yet privy to how this stuff works in terms of how these are calculated, it's wild, okay? And it's based on Pro Bowls and playing time and the combination of the two as a whole. So if you're looking at 3 players that played the same position and you're wondering why they have 3 different projected salaries for 5th-year options, it's not because I didn't have enough coffee that day. It's specifically tied to how much they played and how many Pro Bowls they were selected to original ballots. And I know that sounds crazy. It still sounds crazy to me 6 years later saying it out loud, but that is how these numbers are calculated. So you will have a bunch of variance within positions for these 32 picks in the first round. But that is certainly another thing that will become part of the conversation over the next 2 weeks. I believe it's a May 1st deadline this year to fully exercise or decline those options for the 2026 season. And one last thing in terms of the NFL before we flip the switch over to the NBA here for a bit. I always try to pick some sort of unique piece to put together for the site that surrounds the draft without diving in too much to the actual draft itself, because obviously that's where a majority of this content lives right now, right? Is the mock drafts and the big boards and who's going where. So I've sort of dialed things back to a much more historical situation. I think I'm going to have two separate pieces. So I have one piece ready to roll, which is essentially the top earning player by position in NFL history and where they were drafted. And the think piece part of this was, I wonder how much value there actually is with players that become historic. All right. Do we have, at least positionally, and I gave you the number one and then a couple of honorable mentions with each of these positions, right? Is it really a top-down scenario where if you're not a first-round pick, chances of you getting to this place in history, at least in terms of your position, are slim pickings? Or is there more variance than we actually think? And do we maybe overvalue the first round even 50 years later? That's step one. So I've got some names there. I think you're going to know some of them. I think a few of them will definitely surprise you and maybe even take you back to a better time in your life. And then I went one step deeper, which is I took each position and I laid out all 7 rounds plus an undrafted table. All right. And I gave you the top earning player by position, drafted by round. So you'll know who the highest earning 3rd round pick wide receiver is in NFL history after you've read this piece, how many seasons he played, and a little bit more information about each going forward. But that'll give you a peek at to who actually did bring the value, right? The undrafted running back is Arian Foster, for those of you who had multiple years of fantasy lore with him. All right. He's the highest earning undrafted running back in NFL history, obviously through 2024 as of today. That's the piece. So every position goes every round plus undrafted. Who's the highest earning player? And it's a throwback. All right. It's an absolute throwback. Even the quarterbacks, you could probably name, I'd say 5 of them. It's a pretty good trivia. I think you could get through 5 of the 8, but would you know the 7th round pick? You'd probably know the undrafted player. But I had some fun with this one. It was certainly a couple eye openers for me, and I think you'll enjoy this. I do have to do just a little bit of data tweaking work on some of the older players to make sure that some of the UDFAs from back in the day who had 20-year careers didn't amass more money than some of the players that we have in the system, which is, pretty much from 2008 through 2025. So I'm going back into the 1990s for some players and checking on some things just to make sure that I don't have things wrong. But I think that version, kind of part 2 of this top earnings / draft piece, is going to be really fun. And we'll talk about that on the show a little bit going down the road as well. So look for those on SpyTrade.com in the coming days, probably the first today, Monday. Probably have that other one by Wednesday, and we'll tease that for Thursday's show as well. All right, let's flip the switch to the NBA and talk with Keith Smith. All right, Keith, it's been a long time coming. I should have had you on the show probably each of the past 3 weeks because the NBA has been ramping up to the postseason, winding down the regular season, and it just means that there's a hell of a lot more to talk about and more to write about, which I know is where you have been for, I don't know, the past 6 weeks, probably leading up to these team previews. You're going team by team. How many teams do they have live on Spot Track? And then we'll get to some of the takeaways from them.
Yeah, live so far are are the Utah Jazz, New Orleans Pelicans, and Washington Wizards. We go in order of elimination, mostly because sometimes as you get deeper in the playoffs kind of tell us what a team might do in the summer and what they need. So we want to make sure we don't jump the gun on that. It really is. Those fans of those teams, they've been ready for an off-season preview since like the trade deadline. So we want to give them something ready to go. But yeah, Charlotte Hornets should be out hopefully later today, and then we're really going to start banging them out here now that we're into only a couple games a night.
Which team did the best job of tanking for Cooper Flagg this year?
I think it's probably Washington, because they did it in a way where they were more just regular bad, I guess is the best way to put it. They didn't really pull a lot of shenanigans until we got pretty deep after the trade deadline. They played their kids. They had 4 guys that they played in their regular starting group that are first or second year players. They played a couple other guys who are still on rookie contracts and just were bad, but they developed. They got infinitely better as the year went along. If you really go from game 1 to game 82, guys like Alex Sarr, Bob Carrington, Bilal Coulibaly, unfortunately, he got hurt in the second half of the year. And then Keyshawn George, like they all really got better. And that's, to me, if you can pull off the idea of let's tank or position for ping pong balls while developing our young talent, and we're not just sitting a whole bunch of vets, that's a pretty good job.
Is that also then your favorite team to acquire Cooper Flagg, or do you have somebody else in mind as best case scenario for him coming out number 1?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough, but I mean, I'm certainly fine with that. I would like to see something really good happen for Charlotte. Feels like they're just kind of the forgotten franchise in the league. Like they've got this group of players that they're top of mind, because I'm finishing their offseason preview today, that are like, they're kind of fun to watch, but none of them translate to winning. And that, makes it real messy. And I think Cooper Flagg could really help change things there. I kind of don't want him to go to San Antonio if they got lottery luck, because nobody needs him and Wembanyama on a team for the next decade. I don't know how anybody's going to win very much a few years from now if those two guys are teaming up. So I'm really okay if he goes just about anywhere, but and it's nothing against the Spurs, but you already got your once in a lifetime guy. And really that's happened 3 times in your franchise's history. We don't need a 4th in this short of order.
I'm going to throw maybe a tough one at you here. Which team, if they don't get the number 1 pick, do you think that means their offseason changes significantly? You know what I mean? Like, so much is invested in the opportunity for that to happen. But if it doesn't happen, we're going to zag and go this direction instead.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say probably, boy, that's tough. Because I think a lot of these teams are pretty well set on their path. Maybe Utah, because if Utah gets Cooper Flagg, you can see a world where, all right, now we actually play our guys. We don't sit Lauri Markkanen for half a season, and we go. And we're pretty good right out of the gate. We could probably make a leap into play-in tournament contention in the Western Conference this coming season, and the year after that, we build towards being a playoff team. So it's probably them. I think a team, if they do win, where it very drastically changes it, is New Orleans. Because I think if they win the lottery and get Cooper Flagg, I think Zion Williamson's getting traded. I think there's a good chance he gets traded anyway, but that would make it that much easier, because it's like, we have his replacement. Get excited. We have Cooper Flagg. Let's go. So I think that's probably the answer on both sides of that coin.
What did you read into the firing of David Griffin there, in terms of that philosophy and that concept going forward? Do you think there was butting heads even heading into this offseason, or do you think that this was just the start of some sort of next chapter and it was just time?
Yeah, I think more the latter. I think for the Pelicans, David Griffin's been there a long time, and the team has not won consistently. They had 2 seasons with playoff appearances, 2 seasons with a better than 500 record, and that's just tough. And I know so much of that is tied to Zion. They came in together. Everything was built around him, and he's played in more than, I think, 60 games twice in his career. Like, that's just not, you're not going to win when you have that going on. And then on top of that, you had multiple other players get hurt, this year being the biggest disaster they've had with injuries, with Brandon Ingram and DeJounte Murray and Herb Jones and Trey Murphy all going down. It's a really tough spot, but I think it was just time for change. Let somebody else take a shot at it. And it also, when you make a change like that, almost regardless of what happens in the lottery, you can then move forward with trading Zion because it's not the guy who drafted him. You could say, hey, it's a fresh start. We're going to start over. A little easier than if you, pushed the guy who drafted him and built everything around him to trade him.
I know you know quite a bit about this contract, but maybe not everything. There's some things hidden in the weeds in terms of how the guarantees are structured and all that, Keith. But there's no retained salary in the NBA, right? It's a complicated process to trade somebody with the matching and all that, but it is pound for pound in terms of contracts moving. So how much interest is there for the remainder of this contract for Zion Williamson in the league, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think a decent amount because of those team protections. So this year, as far as we know, we have not been given any indications otherwise. He's set to make in 25-26, so the upcoming season, almost $8 million, about $7.9 million in that year. That's his guaranteed amount. So in his full amount, it's about $39 million. Now, what that means is the only way the Pelicans get any kind of savings there, and I think people still get confused on this, they'd have to waive him to get any savings, or if he was acquired by another team. But all the years after that, they have very similar type protections where it is he gets some money for meeting weight clauses, and then the rest of the money comes in if he plays enough games. Well, if he plays enough games, I think you are in a spot where he's going to be really good. I mean, he's really good whenever he plays. He's, it's so weird because he's one of the more dominant per minute players that we've seen in the league. It's just been a very long time. So I think what happens with Zion is if I'm another team and I can acquire him, I inherit all those same protections. Where if I'm a year or two in, all right, and I need out of it, I just get out of it. The Pelicans aren't going to return a monster haul for him like you would think, or maybe you would have thought, prior, but they can get a nice return for him. And I think that's the point where I think they're ready for a change. I think some of the off-court stuff is also pushing the organization to say it's time to do something different here. But I do think there will be a team or two, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a good team that says, you know what, we have the ability to go get him. Let's go get him because we can, for lack of a better term, we can accommodate it if he only plays 40 or 50 games because we've got enough talent to cover for when he's out. And the chances for good teams to get a talent like him, they don't come around very often.
Yeah, that's the point, right? And that's why we kind of coined the phrase that everybody in the NBA is tradable. even the worst situation, and maybe Bradley Beal is trying to buck that trend, but even the worst situation has been tradable in this league. And I'm with you, especially, and you guys did a great job of breaking this down on the site. What it appears, and I think you've said this, what it appears is it's a 1-year contract. It's basically pay as you go here. And as long as he hits his weight, which he'd be crazy not to hit on his checkpoints, you just have to buy him out for about 20% of his next year's salary, right? So if that's the catch, if that's what you're looking at, there's a lot of intrigue in that for teams that are maybe one dynamic piece away, even if it's part-time. And we've seen that happen over and over in this league.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think what happens is if you're another team, again, talents like that don't come available very often. So you look at it and you do it, and you do it with this sense of, all right, we'll give it a year. If it doesn't work a year in, all right, we'll move on. And that's why you're not going to get like multiple first round picks or really great top end young talent. It's probably going to be, all right, here's some matching salary that is helpful matching salary for you in New Orleans. Guys who can actually play and fill a need. And we give you the chance to get out of this, wipe your hands clean, get your first start.
Well, one more on him, and then we'll move on because there are some bigger fish to fry here. What type of team is interested in trading for Zion Williamson? Is it a young team? Is it one of these lottery teams that don't hit on Cooper Flag, or is it a contender that could use Zion maybe in a smaller role in hopes to contain him over a longer period?
Yeah, I think you could see both. I think you could see, like, let's say you're Portland and you don't hit in the lottery, you kind of stay where you are. I think you could see a situation where they say, you know what, we can't get a guy like this. And maybe someone like Jeremy Grant is somewhat interesting to New Orleans because he can still play.
Yeah.
We'll give you the chance. You're out of the Zion business. You take Jeremy Grant and we'll throw in somebody else. And that's how they get him. And then they can go. The one that fascinates me is, could we see a world where if they fall short and don't win the title, could Oklahoma City say, why not? Let's go get them. Let's do it right now. And if it goes sideways, all right, it went sideways. We tried something big. And if it goes well, pencil us in for multiple finals appearances coming up here because we're going to have him because they can kind of do the deal where, what do you want? 3 draft picks? Great. Here's 3 draft picks. Yeah. Here's the matching salary in any number of forms that could take for the Thunder. And the Thunder have enough good players where it's like, I mean, we just saw it with Chet Holmgren miss half the season. They won 68 games. Yeah. Now you could add Zion and be like, miss half the season, we win 70 games and off we go. So that's the one I kind of wonder about. Then you get into, could a team like Denver say, let's really do something different here and let's get a guy where, maybe if he's playing with Jokic and take some of that pressure off him and that keeps him a little healthier or whatever. There'll be a market, and I do believe he is going to get traded. It's just going to be really fun to watch how that plays out.
All right. I kind of let this permeate as much as possible through the regular season and then into the play-in. But what is next for this Dallas Mavericks team, Keith? I mean, look, we can speculate on any number of directions for a lot of these teams, right? I think Phoenix might be the most polarizing team, and I'm anticipating your piece on that. I know you've already done a lot of work on it, but that's going to be one of those teams that's kind of stuck in the mud and is going to need help, right? There's other teams like that in the league. Dallas isn't because of what they've opened up here, but are they willing to change now? Are they willing to admit some things out loud, or is this going to be their team in 2025, 26, and they're just hoping for better, sunnier days?
Yeah, one thing I'll say on Phoenix, because it came up in the last few weeks, there was all this discussion about, could they just waive Bradley Beal? Yeah. Could they waive and stretch him? I wrote for the site pretty in depth on here's why they can't even waive and stretch him, as currently structured. So that's, but people can go find that if they want to and check that out. It's there's no get out of jail free cards on the Bradley Beal contract, not even the ones that are even a little painful. Some of those can't even happen. But to your question on Dallas, they have to be slightly different next year because the roster is it's not balanced at all. They have way too many big guys. Now I think the intention was maybe to find another deal after they made the Anthony Davis trade to try to rebalance things a little bit, and it just didn't come to fruition. So I think your first priority is get Kyrie Irving's next contract taken care of. All indications are they are going to re-sign him. It's probably going to be some form of 3-year deal. I don't think it'll be a full max, but I think he's going to be close enough that it won't really matter. We could essentially call it a max. There might be team protection on the end, just given age and injury concern. There's already been reports that they feel like he could return earlier than expected. Normally an ACL tear has become a 1-year injury, but with Kyrie Irving, you're not trying to protect 10 or 15 more years of playing. He's probably got 5 good years left, and that's maybe on the high end. So I think the idea is if he comes back a little early, it cuts a year or two off the end of his career. He's probably not losing that much. So that's where we'll go with that one. Then I think from there, it's like I said, it's rebalancing the roster. It's probably moving one of the bigs out of, it'll probably be Daniel Gafford because Derek Lively's still on the cost controlled rookie scale contract. PJ Washington, what happens there? Jason Kidd out of necessity played these crazy big ball lineups where it was Davis and Lively and Washington and Najee Marshall and Klay Thompson and a whole bunch of guys that were 6'8" or taller. And it kind of worked, but they really did it because they had to. They need to get more ball handling and creation ability on the roster. And that's going to be what they're going to do. It's going to be a busy trade summer for them because they don't have the ability to sign a lot of guys because once they get Kyrie back, it'll fall into a place where they're going to be so tight against the aprons that it's probably not going to be easy for them to do much else. So it'll be via trade, but I think they're going to do quite a bit of work to rebalance that roster.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. The sense that I get early on here in reading some of your pieces and just sort of gauging where we are is we are going to have an explosive trade off season. I mean, to the level of, multiple superstars, to the point of where I don't think I'll be surprised. I don't know that there's a name out there that I would be shocked moves this offseason. And, that includes Giannis and Booker and Durant and some of the players that are largely in conversations. But give me a playoff team. Maybe you already said it. Give me a playoff team that if they don't overachieve, okay, so I'm not talking about the Oklahoma Cities and the Bostons, but a team that's, in the playoffs, but fringe championship contender. But if they don't overachieve over the course of the next couple of months here, they could just blow it up because we do see it once a year.
Yeah, I blow it up is interesting. I think Memphis is probably going to do some different stuff. It feels like we're on the path to that being a quick series. And I said, if they get eliminated very quickly in the playoffs, I think we're in a place where we're going to see them say, let's reevaluate this core group of guys. And maybe it's time to make a change. That may be John Morant. Maybe it is, let's retool around John Morant. We'll see, but they feel like one. It's not blow it up, but I think we're going to see if they fall out in the first round or a non-competitive second round. I think Denver is going to make major changes to their roster. I think you're going to see them. Jokic won't be on the table, and because of that, they're not going to blow it up and bottom out. But I think if they could find a deal for Michael Porter Jr., they'd do it. They'll probably be a lot more open to trading Jamal Murray than they were. And then in the East, there's been some buzz of, like, if the Knicks were to get embarrassed in the second round against the Celtics, if it's like 4-0 or 4-1 rather in 5 games and the games aren't close, are they really just going to run it back with the same group? Or are they going to look at it and say, all right, we got to do something a little bit different here? I personally think the first change there would be they change the coach and go in a different direction that way. But there's a sense of how long are they going to go that way? And then let's see what happens with the Bucks. There's a lot of buzz. And Giannis he's never said like he wants to go anywhere. That's always when a player of that stature has to ask, right? But he's always kind of put it out there, just like maybe setting the stage for if this comes down the line. Like he said a couple of years ago, well, I already won a title. If I can't do that again, and maybe I could do that somewhere else and lift them. I said after the Luka trade, I don't know, maybe I could get traded someday, which a lot of guys said versions of that. So I'm not going to go too crazy, but I think Giannis has kind of set the stage for, hey, if I don't see a way out here and a way to contention, I'm going to look to do something different too.
Okay. Let's finish. I'll get you out of here on maybe the nerdiest conversation we could have, which is we've kind of gone through the prerequisite year of this new CBA, right? Where teams are still finding their footing with these tax rules and the levies and the restrictions. We definitely saw things happen because of those restrictions. And we're going to continue to see that as we lead up to the draft and certainly into the offseason. Just what's your general takeaway of how this league is now structured for trades and for free agency and for overall roster construction based on this latest CBA?
I think it's working almost exactly as intended. I think the idea was never to take teams away from being really good, but it was to take teams away from being really good just by continuing to spend money. Where the Clippers were going was not what the NBA wanted. The other NBA owners did not want that. They did not want it to be just continue to buy yourself out of your mistakes. They wanted it to be, we need to get things back where it's more of a level playing field. It's never going to be a truly level playing field. I mean, the reality is a place like Toronto can't offer the weather a place like Miami can. And, I always say when it comes down to players, they kind of consider 3 things in free agency: money, role, and then the other stuff. Is it somewhere I want to live? And there's a lot of cities guys want to live in compared to others. Sometimes teams are, that's just the way it goes. But I think what we've also seen is when teams are really good, we're going to make you have to be really smart and savvy about how you do this. Or even if you are really smart and savvy, we're still going to make it tight. Your window's going to be short. I don't think, like, everybody right now is like, the Thunder are going to be here for a decade. It's not going to be a decade. I can tell you that right now. And that's not even saying they're going to cheap out and stop spending. It's just not going to be.
It's going to be impossible. Yeah.
And windows are not that long in the NBA. They've never really been that long for several years now. I think the Celtics finally breaking through and winning the title last year, that's probably about as long a run of sustained success now that they finally did get through and win the title that we're going to see. I mean, we're on like year 8 of this kind of core group of guys, winning at a very high level. And that's something that I just don't know that we're going to see very often. And even with them, there's questions of, they don't win the title again this year, they're probably going to start the process of breaking down the team a little bit just to get back into compliance with some of the apron stuff. You're also going to have the teams that they're going to use all the second apron things the way they did the luxury tax, which is going to be an excuse not to spend. There's ownership groups that have done that for years and years. They were like, oh, the luxury tax is such a burden. And everybody's like, well, the only burden is you have to write a bigger check. Like now they have a built-in reason to say, oh, we can't do this. We can't do that if we're over the apron and all these things. So you're going to see some of that as well. But it's also, we've lifted some teams up that are, I think, better than they would have been otherwise. I think Detroit's a good example. The fact that they had to spend to hit the salary floor meant going out and getting a couple guys and paying a couple guys to be players, and then making a couple trades that were pretty interesting in the year to get to the place where they're at. And I think that was helpful. Not to say that they definitely would have sat on money, but we've seen in the past teams sit on 40 or 50 million to the trade deadline. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. One other thing, I'll just let's file it away and we're going to come back to it. I think teams are going to be far more conservative with just handing out supermax deals. The over on the Hoop Collective on ESPN, they call it the fun max, the 30% max. And then they call it the stress max for the 35% max and beyond. I think that the fun max, that's still going to go to the guys who are really good on rookie scale deals. But I think you're going to see a lot more. Well, let's put in kind of some of the stepwise language where it is, if you're first team all NBA, you'll get the full 30. If you're anything less than that, maybe we go to 27% and those sorts of things. So you're going to see that. And then I think the other big thing we're going to see is teams they're not going to go all in on, all right, we got to sign everybody to this 35% max because that's what you do. That's what you do when you have a superstar player. I think what you'll see is, all right, he's a superstar. Well, we could turn him into 2 really good players and a couple draft picks. We're probably going to have to do that because we can't be sitting here with 3 max guys on our roster all at once.
I tend to agree with everything there, that it's sort of rounded into form. There was a fear factor initially, like, so much is changing, right? The world is crumbling. I think outside of Phoenix, which that's its own research project for us, Keith. It really is, because here's my takeaway, and we can finish with this. I'd love your thought. Are the restrictions on Phoenix being over the second apron, and they're projected to be there next year right now on the current roster, is that going to make it harder for them to admit their mistakes out loud and fix this problem? Is it going to take longer for them to reset because the CBA has so much pinned down in them? Or is that the league and the rest of the organization is going to look at them and say, they did this to themselves, right? They knew this was coming and they did this to themselves by making that final trade for Beal. Where are we with this? Because I don't want to stop teams from being aggressive. I liked most of what Phoenix did leading up to that Beal trade, and I don't want teams to be scared off from doing that, necessarily speaking, just because it may set you back 4 years to try to get out of it, like it may for Phoenix here. Is there a clear path for them to continue to fix this over the next few years, or do you think this might be where the CBA clamps down just a little bit too much? Yeah,
that path is definitely not clear. Kevin Durant is very likely to get traded. It's like 99.9%. But this is not trading Kevin Durant even when the Suns traded for him. You're not going to get this mega return for Kevin Durant. Now, because other teams fall under the same restrictions as well, where they have to match salary in trades, they'll probably get a couple of players who can help as they kind of, again, it's rebalancing the roster a little bit. But they're stuck with Beal for now. I think next year becomes very tradable. Then it'll be an expiring contract, and that's a lot easier to move. Those always have value. There are teams that are really showing they may be positioning for cap space coming up in a couple years. So that'll be a thing where that'll probably be the way that goes. So you'll be able to do that. But yeah, it's going to be tough. And I think they're a good test case for you can go this route. You better make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Boston went this route, not to the same extremes as Phoenix, of course. They're not nearly as expensive, but they made I could argue all the right decisions, right? All the guys that they decided to go in on all paid off. Minnesota, very expensive team, has made most of the right decisions. It looks like they're doing okay. We'll see ultimately where these playoffs go for them, but they're doing okay. Phoenix just didn't make the right decisions. You built a roster of 3 guys who have overlapping skill sets when you probably only ever need 2 guys who do that. And the complementary players aren't the right mix of complementary guys. There's no real size on the roster. There's no veteran guard who's going to be like, everybody stop, like settle down. Let's get organized here. There isn't anybody who does that. And the main 3 guys, that's not what they do. And that's not to call them selfish players because they're not. But they're just not, that's not ever been their role. They've never been that guy. So Phoenix kind of, they did okay with the Durant trade, but I would argue almost everything since then they've kind of gotten wrong. And that's the problem is when you get all the rest of it wrong, you're going to put yourself stuck. And I'll say this too. It's harder now, but it's always been hard when you build a really expensive team and it all goes sideways. There's always those teams where look at the Brooklyn Nets. Why the Celtics are in the position they're even in is because the Nets said under the old world where it's far easier to just load up, let's load up. And they made all the wrong decisions and then ended up, buried for a while until ironically, KD and Kyrie bailed them out in a year that they had cap space. That's the last thing I'll say too. It's kind of funny how everything comes full circle. There's Sean Marks again in a year where all these teams need help. And he's the only one this summer who's going to be sitting on cap space. And he's probably sitting there saying, all right, you need to make a big trade. You need a third partner. Here I am. And as I like to say, there's a big statue that sits out there that says, bring me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. For Brooklyn, it's bring me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor, you're bad contracts. Just send them with a first-round draft pick and we'll get it done.
Great stuff as always. Looking forward to the more pieces on Spotrac.com, Keith. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for the show today. We'll be back with some MLB updates with Dan Soman. And like I said, some draft/career earnings pieces coming live on Spotrac that we'll talk about later in the week as we prep for the 2025 NFL draft. Visit bettoredge.com. That's BETTOREDGE. Use code Spotrac at registration. Get yourself $20 of free betting, the only social betting site you need, and there's an iOS app to go with it as well. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spotrac Podcast.